The funeral ended a little after 3 in the afternoon. By 3:15, my stepson stood in the hallway of the house I had shared with his mother and said, "No more free rides, old man. Pack your bags and get out." 15 minutes later, two black Cadillac Escalades rolled up to the curb to take me home to an estate worth $27 million. He never knew it belonged to me. The smell of lilies still clung to my suit. If you have ever buried someone you loved for 25 years, you know funeral flowers smell final. I came back from the cemetery behind everybody else, moving slowly because my knees had turned into weather reports years earlier. The dining room table was covered with foil pans and pound cakes from women at our church. Somebody had brought fried chicken in a blue casserole dish with masking tape on the lid. Somebody else had left paper cups beside a stack of sympathy cards. Loretta would have hated the clutter. She believed grief deserved a clean room. Her favorite blue mug was still by the kitchen sink, a little crescent of tea dried at the bottom. She had used it 5 days before the hospital called us back in. Without thinking, I reached for it, then stopped with my hand in the air. She was not coming back to wash it. I wanted 5 minutes in my recliner, that was all. 5 minutes to sit with the quiet and let my bones remember that the woman who used to hum while folding towels was gone. But Darnell stepped into the hallway and blocked me. His tie was loose. His eyes were red, but not from crying. Anger had always colored his face faster than sorrow. "We need to talk," he said. I nodded. "Can it wait until tomorrow?" "No." There was no hesitation in him, no mercy for the day, no understanding that his mother had been lowered into the earth less than an hour earlier. "My mama's gone now," he said. I looked at him and said nothing. He folded his arms. "So the free ride is over." I frowned a little. "What are you talking about?" "You heard me. No more free rides, old man. Pack your bags and get out." The words moved down the hallway like cold air. For a second, I honestly wondered if grief had twisted what I heard. Not because I thought Darnell was incapable of cruelty. I knew better than that. I just did not believe he would choose that hour. I glanced toward Loretta's photograph on the mantel. It had been taken on our 20th anniversary trip to Door County. She was laughing because I had dropped an ice cream cone right before the picture. It was a full laugh, head tilted back, hand on my arm, the kind of laugh that made strangers smile without knowing why. I almost smiled. Almost. Darnell followed my eyes. "Don't do that," he said. "Do what?" "Act like you belonged here more than I did." I took a slow breath. "I never tried to replace your father. You didn't have to. Mama did that for you." There it was. That old resentment Loretta had spent years trying to soften. Still alive, still fed, still looking for a room to burn down. I could have corrected him right there. Legally, I knew exactly where things stood. The ownership of that house was not what Darnell imagined. The money behind it was not what he imagined either. But Loretta was barely in the ground. Turning her living room into a courtroom felt like the ugliest way to honor her. So I stayed quiet. Darnell walked to the entry table, picked up my truck keys, and tossed them across the polished wood. They hit hard enough to make one of Loretta's little ceramic bowls jump. "Take your old Ford," he said. "It's probably the only thing you ever paid for." I looked down at the familiar key fob. My F-150 had close to 200,000 miles on it. The driver's seat leaned left. The radio only worked when it felt like it, and the heater had a spiritual relationship with patience. Loretta used to say that truck reminded her of me. "It ain't pretty," she would say, "but it gets where it needs to go." That memory came so sharp I had to look away. I picked up the keys carefully. "Not today, Darnell." His jaw tightened. "Oh, we're done pretending now." "I'm not pretending." "Then leave." I did not answer. I walked upstairs. Our bedroom looked exactly the way we had left it that morning. Her reading glasses rested on the nightstand. Her cardigan hung on the back of the bedroom door. A bookmark sat halfway through the mystery novel she had been reading during chemotherapy. She had underlined a sentence in pencil. Loretta underlined novels like they were textbooks and then denied doing it. I stood there a long time, not crying, just standing. Sometimes the silence after a death is worse than the death itself. I opened the closet and pulled out my old leather suitcase. It had traveled with us through half the country, from New Orleans to Seattle, from Savannah to Santa Fe. Loretta refused to let me buy a new one. "This one still has life in it," she used to say. That was how she saw the world. She believed in repairing things if they could still be repaired. Shoes, furniture, people, marriages, old suitcases. Sometimes she held on longer than I thought was wise, but she did it with such grace I rarely argued. I folded a few shirts, 2 pairs of socks, my blood pressure medicine, a pair of jeans, and a framed picture of Loretta holding our old golden retriever in the backyard. Nothing else mattered. As I zipped the suitcase, I saw a cream-colored envelope lying neatly on my pillow. My name was written on the front. Marcus, only that. I knew her handwriting instantly. It had grown weaker in the last months, but it still carried her. Careful, clear, no wasted lines. I slipped the envelope inside my jacket. Not yet. Downstairs, Darnell was pacing by the front door. "You finally ready?" "I am." He looked almost disappointed that I was not shouting. No threats, no begging, no dramatic speech. Just an old man in a black suit carrying a worn suitcase. I walked out. The air had turned cooler than it had been at the cemetery. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez pulled back her curtain. She had lived in that neighborhood almost as long as Loretta. Her husband had passed 2 winters earlier, and Loretta had spent 6 weeks bringing her soup, tea, and gossip she pretended was news. Mrs. Alvarez stepped toward her porch. I gave her a small shake of my head. "Please do not. Not today." She understood and stepped back inside. I rolled my suitcase onto the sidewalk. Darnell stood in the doorway behind me. "Don't come back," he said. I did not turn around. The street was strangely still. Even the birds seemed to have enough sense to keep quiet. I rested one hand on the suitcase handle and the other against my bad knee. Grief does strange work on a man. It strips away the things he thought would matter. Pride, possessions, the need to win the next sentence. Standing there in the suit I had buried my wife in, all I wanted was 5 more minutes with her. Instead, I got engines. 2 black Escalades turned onto the street and eased to the curb. They were not speeding. They were not trying to make a scene. They simply arrived. The driver of the first one stepped out wearing a dark suit and gloves. He walked straight toward me. "Mr. Whitaker?" "Yes." He gave a respectful nod. "Miss Benton asked us to bring you home." Behind me, I heard Darnell whisper, "Who?" The driver reached for my suitcase. "I've got it," I said. "As you wish, sir." Sir. I had not heard anyone call me that all day. I climbed into the back seat. Before the driver closed the door, I looked once toward the house. Darnell stood at the front window where Loretta used to wave every morning when I pulled away for work, even after I told her she did not have to. Then the door closed softly. No speech, no victory, no satisfaction, just silence. As we pulled away from the curb, I reached into my jacket and removed Loretta's envelope. My hands trembled a little. I opened it. The first sentence stopped me cold. "Marcus, if Darnell did what I feared he would do, then it is time he learned the truth." The driver took me north without asking questions. I appreciated that. Some people think silence is empty. Loretta never did. She could sit beside me on a 2-hour drive and say 3 sentences, and somehow I would feel more understood than I did after a room full of talk. We passed Waukegan Road and turned onto a quieter stretch, where the houses sat farther back from the street. By the time we reached the iron gate, dusk had begun settling over the trees. The driver lowered his window. The gate opened. We rolled up the long driveway past old oaks and hedges trimmed more neatly than Loretta ever liked. "Looks like a place afraid of real life," she once said. Then the house appeared. $27 million, according to the last appraisal. Stone front, slate roof, 8 bedrooms we rarely used. A library with a rolling ladder that Loretta called ridiculous until she discovered she liked climbing it. A kitchen big enough for 3 families, though she still preferred the smaller side kitchen because it reminded her of her grandmother's place in Bronzeville. People imagine a house like that makes a man feel powerful. That night it made me feel small. Too much house, too much quiet, too much space where her voice should have been. The driver opened my door. "Will you need anything else, Mr. Whitaker?" "No, thank you." I stood with my suitcase beside me, staring at the front steps. Loretta had always used the side door by the kitchen. Front doors are for people who don't know where the food is, she used to say. So I walked around to the side. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old wood. Celeste had arranged for someone to keep the place ready while Loretta was sick, but ready is not the same as alive. I set my suitcase down and turned on one lamp. That was all I could handle. In my study, Loretta's photograph sat on the desk in a silver frame. She wore a pale blue sweater, the one she saved for mornings when she wanted to feel put together. Her phrase, not mine. I lowered myself into the chair, my knees stiff from the cold in the cemetery. Then I read her letter. Marcus, if Darnell did what I feared he would do, then it is time he learned the truth. I had to stop. I pressed my thumb against the page. Her handwriting had lost some of its strength near the end. The loops were thinner. The lines wandered a little. But it was still Loretta. I read on. I know you promised me years ago that you would let me handle Darnell in my own way. I also know that promise cost you more than you ever admitted. That sentence found a place in me I did not know was still tender. Loretta had never liked admitting fear. She would admit pain. She would admit fatigue. She would admit when my cornbread was too dry. But fear, almost never. In the letter, she wrote that she had been afraid Darnell would stop trying to stand on his own if he knew the truth about my money. Afraid he would see me not as family, but as a rescue plan. Afraid he would raise his children to believe responsibility was something other people carried for them. Then came the sentence that hurt the most. I thought I was protecting him, but maybe I was protecting the wrong part of him. I leaned back in the chair, and the memory came without permission. I met Loretta 25 years earlier at a hospital fundraiser on the North Shore. I had written a large check, but that was not what she remembered. What she remembered was that after the event ended, I stayed to help fold chairs. You don't have to do that, she told me. I know. Then why are you doing it? I shrugged. Because they're heavy, she laughed. Not politely, really laughed. That was Loretta. She noticed the small things that told the truth about a person underneath. When we started dating, Darnell was already grown. He was in graduate school, full of opinions and wounds he never explained cleanly. His father had left when he was young, and Loretta carried guilt over that like a purse she could not put down. The first time I came to Sunday dinner, Darnell barely looked at me. So what do you do? He asked. Real estate investment, I said. He smirked. So you buy buildings other people actually work in? Loretta gave him a look. I let it pass. I thought time would soften him. Time does not always do that. Sometimes time hardens the story a person has chosen about you. Early on, Loretta asked me not to talk about the full size of my business. Not the sale of my company shares, not the buildings I still owned, not the land trusts. Not the fact that I had been poor long enough in my youth to know exactly what money could and could not fix. He's proud, she told me one night while drying dishes. Too proud. If he thinks you can fix every problem, he'll never face himself. I don't want to lie to him. You're not lying, Marcus. You're just not announcing everything. Back then it sounded reasonable, even loving. So when Darnell needed help with tuition, the money came through Loretta. When his credit cards got away from him after his divorce, Loretta handled it. When he needed a down payment, Loretta said she had moved some things around. When his contracting company nearly collapsed after the pandemic stalled projects, he believed his mother had saved him. Every time I stood behind her quietly, I told myself I was preserving his dignity. That night in my study, I finally understood the other side of silence. Silence can become a room where falsehoods get comfortable. Across town, Darnell was probably walking through Loretta's house, opening drawers that did not belong to him yet, looking for proof of the life he thought was waiting. He would not find much. Celeste Benton had made sure of that. The important documents had been secured long before Loretta passed. The trusts, the ownership records, the medical directives, the letters. Loretta was gentle, but she was not careless. Later, Celeste told me what Darnell did find. A handwritten note tucked into an old recipe box. Loretta had left it for him. Darnell, do not underestimate Marcus. You do not know what that man has done for this family. That was all. Not enough to explain. Enough to warn. But Darnell did not take it as a warning. He took it as betrayal. By 9 that night, Celeste called me. Marcus, she said. Darnell contacted an attorney. I rubbed my forehead. Already? Yes. What is he claiming? There was a pause. He says he believes you stole everything from his mother. I looked at Loretta's photograph. Her smile seemed almost sad beneath the desk lamp. What do you want me to do? Celeste asked. For a long time, I said nothing. Then I folded Loretta's letter and placed it carefully back in the envelope. Nothing tonight, I said. Tonight, I'm still her husband. The next morning, I drove myself into Chicago. Not in one of the Escalades. In my old Ford. The truck rattled whenever I hit a pothole on I-94. The seat leaned left. The heater took forever. The steering wheel had a worn spot where my thumb had rested for years. Loretta loved that truck. It keeps you humble, she used to say. Woman, this truck keeps me uncomfortable. Same thing, depending on the man. I smiled despite myself. By 9:30, I was pulling into the parking garage beneath Celeste Benton's office. She had represented Loretta and me for nearly 20 years. Celeste was not flashy, no television lawyer voice. No expensive speeches. She believed documents should do the talking. When I stepped into her office overlooking the river, she stood and hugged me. No words at first, just a hug. I wish we were meeting under different circumstances, she said. So do I. She waited until we sat before opening a thick leather binder. I've reviewed everything again. I figured you had. You know Darnell has officially retained counsel. I heard. She studied me carefully. You don't seem surprised. I'm disappointed. She nodded. There's a difference. That was why I trusted Celeste. She never confused emotion with judgment. She slid the binder across the desk. I want you to see something. The first page was a spreadsheet. Date, transfer, amount, purpose. I recognized every line, every decision, every check. 22 years of quiet rescue laid out in rows. $25,000 for graduate school, $48,000 to clear high-interest debt after Darnell's divorce, $320,000 to keep his contracting business alive when projects stopped, mortgage help, medical bills, emergency house repairs, college savings, summer program fees, vacation money when he wanted his children to have memories he could not afford, every transfer, every wire, every cashier's check, total family support, $1,143,600. I stared at the number for several seconds. I never added it up, I said. Celeste folded her hands. I didn't think you had. Money had never felt like keeping score to me. Loretta and I saw it differently. Money solved problems. It bought time. It reduced fear. It created opportunity. It was not something to wave around. It was not something to use to make another person feel small. Ironically, hiding it had helped Darnell make me small anyway. Celeste broke the silence. Every dollar came from your accounts. I know. Every transfer Loretta made to Darnell was funded by you first. I know. Every record matches. I know. She closed the binder halfway. Marcus. What? You sound guilty. I leaned back in the chair. Maybe I am. For what? For helping. For letting him believe the wrong story. She did not answer immediately. She walked to the window and looked down at the water. Office workers crossed the bridge below with coffee cups and winter coats. Life carrying on because life does not wait for grief to catch up. Finally, she turned back. Helping someone quietly is not the same as deceiving them. Maybe not, but silence has consequences. That sentence landed hard because it was true. Darnell had not invented his version of history from nothing. Loretta and I had handed him enough missing pieces to build the wrong picture himself. I should have told him years ago, I said. Celeste tilted her head. Would he have believed you? I thought about that. Probably not. Back then he would have called it bragging, or manipulation, or me trying to buy his respect. No, he had not been ready. Maybe he still was not. We spent another hour reviewing strategy. There was not much drama to it. Facts, bank statements, trust agreements, property records, tax filings. Evidence does not get emotional. It simply waits. As I was leaving, my phone vibrated. Nia, I smiled automatically. My granddaughter almost never called during school hours. Hey, sweetheart. Silence. then a shaky breath. Granddad? Something in her voice stopped me in the hallway. What's wrong? She tried to answer and started crying. Real crying. The kind people cannot fake because it takes over the body before pride can stop it. I found an empty conference room and closed the door. Nia, baby, what happened? Dad said we're not supposed to talk to you anymore. I closed my eyes. What exactly did he say? Another pause. He said you took Grandma Loretta's money. My chest tightened. He said you manipulated her while she was sick. I rested my free hand against the conference table. He said Grandma would have wanted everything to stay with her real family. Then she whispered, he said you're not really our grandfather. That one hurt. Not because of blood, because of birthdays, Christmas mornings, dance recitals, science fairs, broken bicycles, homework at the kitchen table, hospital visits. Blood does not create those memories. Time does. I'm sorry, Nia whispered. You don't have anything to apologize for. I didn't know what to believe. I understand. No, she said, voice cracking again. I don't. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then another voice came onto the line. Granddad? I'm here, Jalen. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Did you really steal from Grandma? Children ask questions without trying to wound you. That is why their questions cut so deep. I swallowed. No. You promise? I promise. He hesitated. Dad says people with lots of money always lie. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it sounded exactly like Darnell. Jalen? Yeah? Has Granddad ever lied to you before? Silence, a long silence, then, no. Then don't let somebody else's anger replace your own memories. I miss Grandma. So do I. Very quietly, he said, I miss you too. The call ended a few minutes later. I stayed in that conference room staring at the dark phone screen. Not when Darnell threw me out. Not when he insulted me. Not even when he accused me of stealing. People can believe terrible things about me if they choose. I can survive that. But poisoning Loretta's memory in the minds of two children she adored, turning love into suspicion, making them question every good day we had ever given them together? No, that crossed a line I could not ignore. I walked back into Celeste's office. She looked up immediately. What happened? I sat down again. Nia called. She did not interrupt. I told her everything, every word. When I finished, she took a slow breath. So? So I won't answer him with anger. No, I'll answer him with the truth. She nodded once. I think Loretta would agree. Just then, her assistant knocked gently on the open door. Ms. Benton? Yes? A courier just delivered this. She handed Celeste a sealed envelope. Celeste opened it. Her expression changed instantly. What is it? I asked. She looked directly at me. Darnell officially filed this morning. For what? She slid the first page across the desk. Petition to probate court. Allegation. Undue influence. He was accusing me of manipulating Loretta during the final years of her life in order to control her estate. I read the first page twice. Then I folded it neatly. So, I said quietly, it begins. For 2 days, I heard nothing from Darnell directly. That worried me more than yelling would have. Darnell had always been loud when he felt cornered. Loud on the phone, loud at family dinners, loud when a waiter brought the wrong side dish, loud when Jalen scraped the side of his car with a bike handlebar. Silence from him meant he was preparing something. I spent those 2 days in the big house, moving from room to room like a man visiting a museum of his own life. Loretta's gardening gloves still sat in the mudroom. Her paperback novels were stacked beside the living room chair. In the pantry, I found a box of herbal tea she had bought because she wanted to become the kind of woman who liked herbal tea. She never did. I stood there holding that box, laughing under my breath until the laugh broke into something else. Grief does not arrive as one clean wave. It leaks through ordinary things. A mug, a sweater, a grocery list, a tea bag nobody liked. On the third morning, Celeste called. Marcus, are you sitting down? That is never a good beginning. Darnell posted something online. I looked out the kitchen window toward the trees. What kind of something? A long Facebook post in a local community group. I did not ask her to read it. She did anyway. My elderly mother was isolated and financially controlled by her husband before she died. I closed my eyes. Celeste's voice stayed calm, but I could hear the disgust beneath it. The post accused me of keeping Loretta away from family. It suggested I pressured her during treatment. It said Darnell had been cut off while trying to protect his mother's legacy. Legacy? That word almost made me set the phone down. Loretta's legacy was not a bank account. It was the way she remembered every nurse's birthday at the hospital. It was the way she made gumbo for grieving families. It was the way she once drove 40 minutes because Nia forgot her dance shoes before a recital. Darnell had taken all of that and reduced it to money. By noon, the post had comments. By evening, a local blog had picked it up as a family dispute involving alleged financial control. No one called me for a statement. That did not surprise me. A sad headline travels faster than a complicated truth. The next morning, I went to the diner near Waukegan Road. I had eaten breakfast there for nearly 15 years. Same booth when it was open. 2 eggs over medium, wheat toast, black coffee. Loretta used to order oatmeal and then steal my bacon. When I walked in, the bell above the door rang like always. But the room changed. Not obviously, not dramatically, just enough. A man at the counter lowered his newspaper. 2 women in the back booth stopped talking. Roberta still poured my coffee, but she did not call me Mr. Steady like she usually did. "Morning," she said. "Morning, Roberta." She avoided my eyes. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I needed everybody to admire me. It hurt because that town had a way of smiling politely while deciding whether you were guilty. I ate half my breakfast, paid in cash, and left a $20 tip because Roberta had 2 boys in college, and one bad morning should not erase years of kindness. Outside, an older man I knew from Loretta's charity board was walking toward the door. "Mr. Keating," I said. He looked at me, then looked away. "Marcus." That was all. One word, cold as January. By the time I got home, my knee had stiffened so badly I had to hold the kitchen counter before climbing the stairs. I wanted to write something. A statement, a correction, one clean paragraph explaining who paid for what. But every sentence felt like dragging Loretta back into the dirt. So I called Celeste. "I won't answer online." "I didn't think you would." "I won't drag her name through mud just to clean mine." Celeste was quiet a moment. "Then we do it properly." Properly meant depositions, statements under oath, documents. A conference room with stale coffee and people pretending not to enjoy pain. Darnell arrived at the deposition wearing a navy suit and an expression that said he had convinced himself he was noble. His lawyer was younger than I expected. Sharp haircut, sharper tone. He began with sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Whitaker." "Thank you." Then he went to work. "Isn't it true Mrs. Whitaker regularly transferred money to her son?" "Yes." "Large sums sometimes?" "Yes." "And isn't it true those transfers increased after Mrs. Whitaker became ill?" Celeste sat beside me, still as stone. I answered, "Yes." Darnell leaned back slightly, pleased. His lawyer continued. "So while your wife was undergoing cancer treatment, substantial family money was being moved through her accounts?" "Yes." "To her son?" "Yes." He looked at Celeste as if expecting an objection. She did not give him one. Instead, she opened a binder. "Counsel, would you like the corresponding source transfers?" The young lawyer blinked. "I'm sorry." Celeste slid copies across the table. "For each transfer Loretta Whitaker made to Darnell Hayes, there is a preceding transfer from Marcus Whitaker to Loretta Whitaker in the same or greater amount." The room went still. Darnell's lawyer looked down. 50,000. 120,000, 300,000, then more, each one labeled Darnell's mortgage rescue, business recovery, Nia's tuition fund, Jalen's medical expenses, house repairs after the basement flood. The lawyer turned pages more slowly as he went. Darnell's face shifted from confidence to irritation. "Those could be fake," he said. His lawyer touched his arm. "Darnell." "No," Darnell snapped. "Rich people can make papers say anything." Celeste looked at him. "Bank records are not diary entries, Mr. Hayes." He glared at her. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because I could see what was happening. The truth was not only proving him wrong, it was threatening the story he had used to excuse himself for years. That his mother had always chosen him, that I had taken from him, that his failures were someone else's fault. After the deposition ended, Darnell walked past me without a word. At the elevator, he stopped. "You think this makes you a saint?" I looked at him. "No." "Then what?" I considered telling him I never wanted his gratitude, that I would have traded every dollar to have Loretta back for one ordinary morning. Instead, I said, "It makes me tired." He stared at me like he did not understand. Maybe he did not. Celeste and I waited until he left. Then she gathered her papers. "This won't settle," she said. "I know. His attorney may advise him to withdraw, but Darnell won't listen." "No." She closed the binder. "Then we go to court." I looked out the window at the gray Chicago sky. A thin snow had started falling. Celeste lowered her voice. "Marcus, once we present these records publicly, Darnell will not just lose the case." I turned toward her. "He'll lose the story he has been telling himself his whole life." The probate courtroom in Lake County was smaller than most people imagine. No marble columns, no dramatic gallery, just wood-paneled walls, rows of benches, and a judge who had probably heard every version of family betrayal. The room was filled with people who once knew Loretta, neighbors, former co-workers from the hospital, women from her volunteer committee. Even Roberta from the diner came. She gave me a small nod when I walked in. It was not an apology. It did not need to be. Sometimes one honest look repairs more than 100 explanations. Celeste and I took our seats. I wore the same navy sport coat I had owned for nearly 10 years, a freshly pressed white shirt, and old brown shoes I had polished myself before sunrise. Loretta always said polished shoes showed respect, not for other people. For yourself. Across the aisle, Darnell looked different. He wore an expensive charcoal suit and a bright silk tie that seemed too loud for a courtroom. His beard was not trimmed carefully. Purple shadows sat beneath his eyes. For the first time since the funeral, I wondered whether grief had finally reached him beneath the anger. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge entered. The hearing began. Darnell's attorney spoke first, noticeably more restrained than he had been during the deposition. "Your Honor, my client believes his late mother's estate was manipulated through years of financial influence." Believes, not knows. A subtle but important difference. He described Loretta as a devoted mother who had become vulnerable during cancer treatment. He suggested I had isolated her, directed financial decisions, and placed my interests above her family. When he finished, the judge turned toward Celeste. "Ms. Benton." She stood without hurry. "No opening statement, Your Honor." The judge looked mildly surprised. "You may proceed." Celeste nodded. "Thank you." She walked to the presentation screen beside the witness stand. No dramatic pacing, no raised voice. She clicked a small remote. The first slide appeared. Darnell Hayes graduate school tuition paid in full. Below the title were copies of authenticated wire transfers. Source, Marcus Whitaker. Date, amount. Receiving institution. Every document clean and boring and deadly. The room became noticeably quieter. Darnell frowned. His attorney leaned toward him and whispered something. Celeste clicked to the next slide. First home down payment. Again, every payment traced directly to one of my business accounts. Another click. Business recovery support during pandemic shutdowns. $320,000 transferred in stages over 14 months. Another. Medical expenses for Jalen Hayes. Another. Private dance program for Nia Hayes. Another. Emergency roof replacement. Every page looked almost boring. Rows of numbers, bank confirmations, tax records. Nothing emotional, nothing theatrical, just facts. Celeste finally turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, every financial benefit Mr. Hayes attributes to his mother's resources originated from Mr. Whitaker." She let that settle. Mrs. Whitaker acted as the intermediary because she believed preserving her son's pride would help him continue building his own life. No one moved. No one even coughed. She clicked one final time. Total financial support over 22 years, $1,143,600. I heard someone quietly exhale behind me. The judge studied the screen for several moments, then looked toward Darnell. "Mr. Hayes, are you disputing the authenticity of these records?" Darnell swallowed. His voice cracked. "They could have been created later." Celeste calmly handed another binder to the clerk. Original bank certifications, Your Honor. The judge examined several pages, then nodded once. They appear complete. Darnell stared at the table. For the first time, he did not look angry. He looked confused, like a man waking from a dream he had trusted for years. But Celeste was not finished. She reached for another folder. This matter also concerns two individuals who bear no responsibility for today's dispute. The screen changed again. Irrevocable education trusts. Beneficiaries, Nia Hayes and Jalen Hayes. Established 5 years earlier. Funded entirely by Marcus Whitaker. Protected from creditors. Protected from future family disputes. Protected even from me. Darnell looked up sharply. What? Celeste continued. These trusts cannot be revoked because Mr. Whitaker wanted his grandchildren's education protected regardless of future family conflict. The judge adjusted his glasses. So even after this litigation, the trusts remain intact, Celeste said. Darnell turned toward me. You never canceled them? I met his eyes. No. Even after. You were never the reason I created them. His mouth opened, then closed. He had prepared himself to fight a wealthy old man. He had not prepared himself to discover that the man he accused had quietly protected his children for years. After reviewing the evidence, the judge delivered his ruling. The allegations of undue influence lacked factual support. The financial documentation overwhelmingly contradicted Darnell's claims. The petition was dismissed. Just like that, months of accusations ended not with shouting, but with paperwork. The room slowly began emptying. Several people looked at me differently now, not because they suddenly admired wealth, because they finally understood why I had not defended myself online. Truth ages better than outrage. Before we left, the judge asked one final question. Mr. Whitaker, yes, Your Honor. If you would like to make a statement, I will allow it. I had not planned to. Celeste glanced at me. The courtroom waited. I stood carefully, one hand on the table until my knee steadied. Then I looked at Darnell. He could not quite meet my eyes. I never spent $1 of your mother's money, I said. My voice was softer than I expected. I spent 22 years trying very hard not to embarrass you. I paused. I thought protecting your pride was another way of loving this family. Silence filled the room. Maybe that was my mistake. Darnell finally looked up. His eyes were wet. Whether from anger or shame, I could not tell. I don't hate you, I said. I meant it. Hate is too heavy to carry at my age. A few people gave faint, sad smiles. But beginning today, you do not get to call disrespect love. The word settled. And you do not get to call entitlement family. I sat down. No applause, no gas, no dramatic reaction, just silence. The honest kind. Outside the courthouse, there were no television cameras, no reporters, no crowd waiting for a statement, only ordinary people leaving an ordinary courthouse after a lie had finally run out of room. Celeste squeezed my shoulder. It's over. I looked toward the courthouse steps. Darnell stood alone. His attorney had already left. Several neighbors passed him without stopping. He did not look defeated. He looked empty, as though the story he had repeated to himself for decades had disappeared in a single afternoon, and he no longer knew who he was without it. A few months later, I visited Loretta's grave on a cold Thursday morning. The roads were wet from overnight rain, and the sky had that pale gray look Loretta used to call Illinois showing off badly. I brought yellow tulips, not roses. Loretta never cared for roses. Too much attitude, she used to say. Tulips were simpler, cleaner. They opened slowly, as if they trusted the sun would eventually show up. I knelt carefully beside her headstone, my knee complaining the whole way down. Well, I said softly, you were right about Darnell. The wind moved through the bare branches. I set the flowers in the vase, and I was wrong too. That was harder to say, but grief has a way of clearing out pride. I thought silence was kindness. Maybe sometimes it is, but sometimes silence just leaves room for other people to write the story. I stayed there long enough for my hands to get cold. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow, uncertain. I turned. Darnell stood about 20 feet away. No suit, no lawyer, no angry posture, Just jeans, a dark jacket, and the tired face of a man who had finally run out of blame. Marcus, I stood slowly. Darnell. He looked at the tulips. Mama liked those. She did. Another silence passed between us. Then he said, I was wrong. I did not answer right away. He swallowed. I thought you were taking her from me. The old anger tried to rise in him, but it did not quite make it. I didn't know you were holding all of us up. I looked at him. Say that again. He frowned slightly. What? You said you. His eyes dropped. He took a breath. I didn't know you were holding all of us up. That was the first honest sentence he had given me in years, maybe ever. I'm sorry, he said. I believed he meant it, but belief is not the same as trust. I accept your apology. His shoulders lowered with relief. Then I added, but forgiveness does not mean access. He looked up. I kept my voice calm. No more money. He nodded quickly. I understand. No control over Naya and Jalen's trusts. I understand. And you do not use those children to punish me when you are angry. His face tightened with shame. Okay. If you want a relationship with me or with the memory of your mother, you build it with respect, not need, not guilt, not pressure. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to argue. Then he glanced at Loretta's grave. I don't know how. That answer surprised me. It was the first time Darnell had admitted weakness without turning it into somebody else's fault. Then start small, I said. Tell your children the truth. He nodded. I will. We did not hug. This was not that kind of morning. But we stood together beside Loretta for a little while. For then, that was enough. Over the next year, I made changes. The estate was transferred into a foundation Loretta and I had talked about years earlier. It supported widows, older people abandoned by family, and veterans who needed temporary housing while they got back on their feet. I kept the old Ford. Of course I did. The driver's seat still leaned. The heater still took forever. The truck still complained every time I turned onto Sheridan Road near the lake. But on certain mornings when the sun hit the water just right, I could almost hear Loretta laughing beside me. Getting old never scared me. What scared me was realizing some people only love the version of you they can use. Once I stopped begging for a place in lives that had no respect for me, I finally had room to live my own. If you have ever been judged unfairly by people you cared for, I hope you remember this. Respect still matters, truth still matters, and protecting your peace is not the same as giving up on love. Thank you for spending this time with me.